Well, I think the big story actually is the lineups and the dysfunction that existed based on Bill 20 and the rules that they put in place. And of course, the province is divesting themselves of any responsibility by saying, well, you had a year's notice, you should have been able to respond to it. But it is unfortunate because, democracy is based on elections, of course, and voting and getting the vote out. And I have talked to a number of people who have said, well, I was just so frustrated with the lineup, I couldn't wait.
This episode of Bring Back the Porch, brought to you by Bernie Leahy, River Street Realty. Let's get you home. Well, with apologies to Willie Nelson, on the porch again. Just can't wait to get on the porch again, and this time we're back with Jim Groom. Welcome, Jim. Sorry for the singing.
No problem, Brian. It's a good way to start my morning, so...
Yeah. The election is now done. A week ago, we were at the polls. We lined up in long lines. Mm-hmm. We cast our ballots, and we got the results. Yeah. Were you surprised?
Well, I think the big story actually is the lineups and the dysfunction that existed based on Bill 20 and the rules that they put in place. And, of course, the province is divesting themselves of any responsibility by saying, well, you had a year's notice, you should have been able to respond to it. But it is unfortunate because, democracy is based on elections, of course, and voting and getting the vote out. And I have talked to a number of people who have said, well, I was just so frustrated with the lineup, I couldn't wait. And as we talked a little bit before, the turnout becomes questionable. What was the percentage? And it doesn't seem like anybody wants to let that information out too much, because I think there were a lot of frustrated people. I've talked to a lot of folks that have said, I was 2 hours in line and things of this nature. But I went 3 times to try and vote, and the lineups were so bad. I finally was able to get one where it wasn't too bad, and I was able to get through fairly quickly, but it was like at the 11th hour. And I had to wait that long. So as far as the turnout, as far as the actual results are concerned, it's quite interesting. I think we have a lot of candidates for council that were very qualified folks. And there's a few that I wish would have made it as well. But it would have required an expansion from 9 to 12 or maybe even 14 people in order to absorb all those folks. There were some really good candidates and really heartfelt candidates that didn't make it in. But the 8 that did are quality, experienced in some cases, good, well-spoken folks that are going to do a great job. Of course, the mayor's race is an interesting consideration. I've referred to it as a vindication for the mayor, and I still think it's a vindication, even though she went from 66% of the vote to 33% of the vote. She still won a plurality, and not a majority, but a plurality, and that means that she goes to the top of the list, and she's the number one candidate, so she must have done something right. Her base obviously came forward and supported her, and one thing about the base that she has is there's a portion that's very, very loyal and very, very, she can do no wrong, I think, in that case of some of those folks, and so be it.
Yeah. When we talk about this election, I thought that we were going to see a greater turnout because of the turmoil of the last 4 years. Now, we don't know how many eligible votes there or how many eligible voters there were. We do know that there were 18,265 ballots cast, right, and that is about 1,741 less than we had in 2021. To me, I think the problem was, as you said, the long lineups, but it was that active voter list that they had where you could register at City Hall or you could register online. But then when you got to the polls, you had to fill out another form.
Yeah.
And there was 3 computers where these people were trying to keep track of, okay, here comes Joe Blow. We'll scratch him off the list so Joe Blow couldn't go and vote 3, 4, 5 times. They only I talked to the people at the Big Marble Go Center, and they said they only started with 2 computers. They had to bring in another one, and I think that was the case at a couple of places. So that was why the long lines. It took me 1 hour from the time I got to the back of the line till my ballot went into the box.
Yes.
So I stuck to it. But like you said, I know people who said, no, I'm gone. This is not working for me.
And to contextualize it a little bit, the 2021 election was in a COVID year. And we, as you say, we had more people show up during the COVID year to vote than we did this time around. And it'd be nice to quantify it somehow, but I'm not sure. You'd have to have somebody right there at the polls to say, well, you're frustrated, you just didn't vote because it was too much of a lineup, and quantify that. But it didn't make it any easier. And as we discussed in the last time, pre-registering seemed like the thing to do, and yet it was really immaterial because when you showed up, you registered anyway. And the Bill 20 was designed, as I understand it, to prevent voter fraud and all these other things, a problem that didn't exist, and they were trying to solve it. And there was a lot of unintended consequences. The time frame for appeals, they gave 72 hours for an appeal. Well, as we know, Elections Alberta said the formal results weren't announced till Friday. Well, 72 hours from the Monday means that you couldn't appeal because you didn't know the final results. So if anyone had been in that situation where it was so close a vote as we have in Calgary, the process was flawed, and it wasn't thought out very well. So unintended consequences have led to a lot of problems, in my opinion.
How confident do you think people are in the result because of the whole process?
Well, the worst thing for us, as we see in the States, is when people question the actual process, when the process itself is not dependable, isn't trustworthy, isn't believable. All of a sudden you get people who say, well, if the process isn't working, we need to change that process somehow, fundamental change or whatever is required in order to do that. And that becomes an issue. So was this by design or was it by accident that Bill 20 sort of tried to change the structure? You know, this government, the UCP government, has tried to do a lot of social engineering, whether we liked it or not. And of course, we put in political parties in the two major cities, Calgary and Edmonton, and now the ministers already came out and said, well, we're going to continue with that experiment. It was not an experiment. It was an attempt to put the thumb on the scale, and they are going to continue to try and put the thumb on the scale, even though in Calgary an independent was elected, and it really didn't seem like there was much use for party affiliation or slates.
We had to fill out 39 long names on the civic city council ballot. Folding it up was like trying to fold up one of those old road maps, which never seemed to go back together again, right? Why did we have to do that? I know that was provincial legislation, but we have always voted by hand, but a computer card. We just used to circle, and then they put them into the machine to count them. We did not vote electronically. We always had that, X marks the spot. So I'm not sure why we had to go to the hand count.
This goes back to the 2023 May election. So I was working with you and Chat TV at the time, and we were noticing that Banff Kananaskis was at first a UCP, and it looked like they were winning. Through the night, when more polls started to come in, they changed that projection to NDP victory. And the end of the day, the NDP won by 310 votes. At the UCP AGM in November of the same year, recommendation number 13 that came from Banff Kananaskis was that for the integrity of the election process, we should go back to hand-counted ballots. And the Premier, of course, was dependent on her base to get support, and she carte blanche accepted all of the recommendations that came through on that AGM, including hand balloting. And it costs us at least $500,000 more in Medicine Hat. I think they quote $5 million more in Edmonton and something similar in Calgary. It's cost a fortune. And the Premier at one point said, well, we may help augment some of your expenses, but that was pie in the sky, and of course it's over now. So all those municipalities have to absorb those extra costs because of an ideological approach. And of course we remember Tucker Carlson claiming that the American election in 2020 was rigged, and Dominion voting systems wasn't effective, and Fox News was eventually sued for $786 million. Tucker Carlson was fired from his job because he was making these false claims. But unfortunately, the base in the UCP, a part of the base that pretty much has control of the party, believe that that's the problem. And as soon as you discredit the process, you change the entire aspect of democracy. If democracy isn't working because the process is flawed, it causes a lot of dissension within the voting public.
When we look at the mayoral race this year, we see Lindsay Clark won by 767 votes, not the landslide that she had 4 years ago. Any vote splitting come into play there, do you think, that might have led to the result?
By basic math, it would be a vote split. You know, if we see the third and the fourth candidates, or the second and third candidates, obviously, if we look at all the candidates, they had almost 67% of the vote compared to the mayor, who's got 30%. But in a multi-party or multi-candidate system, that's what you get. You get the plurality rather than a majority a lot of times. And the mayor went, as you say, from 66% in the last election to 33% in this time. A lot of people would say, well, that demonstrates that there was more dissension than there was agreement. But the way the system works, you still get the person who gets the most votes wins that plurality, and they go to the head of the class and they take over in that position. I still think it does sort of vindicate the mayor to an extent, in that none of the incumbents, the three incumbents from council that ran, none of them clean slate. And in fact, some were like at 23, 24th in the running. Andy McGrogan, I thought, would have done better, quite frankly. Was he wearing some of what happened because he was on council before? He turned out to be the fourth runner in the script of things. So it was, a repudiation of that former council, and a somewhat of indication for the mayor. And yet I've talked to so many people who said, let's wipe the slate, start from scratch. And I guess there was really no opposition to the mayor, that everybody said, yes, let's galvanize behind that person. Because obviously she didn't get 67% of the vote. She got the 33, or if you like, of the others. So she's not the most popular person based on those elections. But if there's split between all those other people, as you say, it's a bit of a vote splitting without the traditional aspect of vote splitting is you vote against somebody and you team up, and you might not like candidate number two, but everybody votes for them to avoid getting elected number one, right? The anybody but candidate type of thing.
Drew Barnes finished second, 767 votes behind. Do you think he brought some political baggage with him?
Yes. I think I think he had a great ground game. I think he's got lots of credibility in his experiences, etc. But you can't ignore his history with the Wild Rose, and in particular the UCP, and getting removed from caucus, and having some positions that might not have sat well with some folks. And the aspect that our premier represents, Medicine Hat, Brooks Medicine Hat, is a little shaky when she wouldn't allow Drew Barnes back into the caucus. And so there might be some thoughts that we would never see the light of day again as a municipality if the premier had to work with Drew. I'm just speculating, of course, but that could have played, as you say, with some of the baggage aspects, it could have played to that regard.
When I go back to 2018, we had 3 newcomers elected to city council. And then, of course, in 2021, we had 6 newcomers. This time we have 5 newcomers, technically not counting Clugston, Cox, or Varga, who have previous experience.
Sure.
The mix we have this time in council, do you like it?
I do. I think that having some experience, of course, the former mayor, Mr. Clugston, on there, he knows the inside ball game aspects of it, and that's got to be beneficial as long as it's doesn't become a conflict. Well, we didn't do it this way. I've worked with people in the past who, well, that's not how we traditionally did it, so why don't we keep the tradition? And you want to bring something new and fresh to it. So you can get that conflict, of course. The mayor's interviews that I've seen to this point have all said collaboration, cooperation, the typical verbiage that you have to give after an election to say, yeah, here's the olive branch. As a former lawyer on the municipality. I think she's more of a technocrat than anything else, and she knows the inside baseball workings of the city hall, and she wants to do that, and she likes to do that, and she can ensure that the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed. But I'm not so sure that's the best way to communicate with your fellow councillors. So we'll have to see if that flushes out.
Interesting that during the 125th celebration of the Medicine Fire and Emergency Services, that the council was there, and they did appear to be united. They were posing for pictures. They were smiling. We heard during the election campaign, we asked some of the candidates, can you work with this person or this person? And they all were very positive about the entire pool that people had to choose from. So do you see that spirit of cooperation lasting past maybe one or two meetings?
No, I honestly don't. I just, I think there's a lot of personalities. Anytime you have a council, there's a lot of AAA personality types, and they have their own ideas and their own constituencies that they're trying to support, and their positions that they're trying to bring forward. And unfortunately, like if you look, the last council was united against the mayor. That was the only thing that seemed to unite them. And when you read the provincial report, the inspector's report, there seemed to be a lot of reasoning for that. But they went really extreme. Like, it's only been a couple of years, and that council not only sanctioned the mayor, made her stay in her office, had to info everybody in the world for any emails, and had half her pay cut. And they started as a very united group, picking a new CAO together, collectively, collaboratively, and it seemed like they were going along smoothly. And all of a sudden, this mayor and the council were so much at odds that that they wouldn't even allow her to do the job. It wouldn't allow her to represent Medicine Hat at public functions. I mean, it was just enormous, the position. So it may take, I don't think 2 meetings is maybe fair. It may take 2 years before I think there will be a bit of a division once again, that they just find that there's too many things that are dividing them, and they're not able to collaborate as much as we would hope they could.
So if you look at it like Survivor, the TV show, and you look at the 8 people on the island around the council table, do you see some alliances forming there?
Oh, absolutely. But I think what's nice about municipal politics is your alliances are fluid. That's one of the reasons slights are so bad, is because those alliances are supposed to be set in stone. Whereas when you have individuals elected as independents, they can be flexible. So if this particular policy suits them, they can go that direction, et cetera. So we will see that. And we did see that to an extent in the previous council, where on certain issues, we would see them binding together, and others they wouldn't. And the big thing that bonded them was against the mayor. They just felt that the mayor was not functioning suitably. And so I hope that's not the case coming forward. But there will be other issues, and unfortunately, as humans, we all have that tribal knowledge that says, wait a minute, on this issue way back here, you didn't support me, so why should I support you on your issue at this point? And you run into that for sure.
When you look at who was elected, do you see any influence from special interest parties that we talked about in our first visit back in August?
Sure. There's obviously some very strong UCP supporters, members, and there will be that influence. There are some progressives that we would consider progressives that don't have an affiliation per se, but they do have an ideological link. I would anticipate in some cases those will clash. They will have a problem. One of the things that was also pretty evident is that there was council members in the previous council who tried to ingratiate themselves with the premier and with the UCP, just even on a meeting by meeting basis. They would jump out in front and I had my discussion with the premier, and they would bring it up at the next council meeting to show influence. And that's not going to be missing again this time. It's just human nature. A lot of these folks have political ideations that they can continue to go on and maybe, become the mayor or become a MLA or whatever the case may be. So we can't preclude some conflicts in that way.
Do you see a group of 5 banding together to control how things go through council?
Well, I do think it'll be more selective than that. I think there will be some issues where we will end up with a 4 and 4, and the mayor will have to break the tie. There will be some 5-3s that go through. I'm not sure if we'll see that consistently because there is. I don't know if they really have agendas per se, but they do have positions that they've taken over the years that would be more reflective of this rather than that. And, the homeless issue that Mayor Cluxton dealt with extensively and was very proud about. We, as a city, I think we were proud about it. When that issue comes up, because, obviously, security in the community, et cetera, is being discussed quite extensively. When that homelessness issue comes up again, I would be very surprised if he changes spots and says, well, no, homelessness isn't important anymore. So I would think that there would be that consistency for as an example. The new members, the 5 new members, as you say, well, they could be anywhere over the agenda and they could be here, there, and everywhere. They've got to establish their positions. And I think they would be fairly flexible and open to persuasion from the other members, which is what democracy really is about, if they can get in there and discuss things well. There's bound to be things that we can't predict. We didn't, some of the committees, the civil committees, some of the individuals within the community that suddenly caused a lot of dissension. Will they show up again? Some have moved, some are relocated. Will other people take that position over? That can have an enormous impact. It's surprising how much it can have. Just one individual who really gets it in their teeth that they want to do something can really do a dissension on something.
When it comes to setting committees and chairs of committees, that's where the mayor can maybe influence things. So I'm wondering who out of these 8 she's going to favor.
Well, now the last council changed her powers in that regard, didn't they? But I don't know if she gets them back or is able to get them back, because that was one of the things that was discussed fairly extensively, to remove her from that responsibility. That's even before the August debacle that caused a lot of the other dissension. They were taking her powers away from her in that regard. And I'm not sure if the bylaw still exists or it will be changed, because traditionally, you're right, the mayor had a choice of saying, these are the power brokers. We're going to put these folks where I want them on certain committees. These folks think like I do, so will I put them on these powerful committees, or will I put them on the less important committees that exist? And there's such a lot of committees, of course, and some folks are buried because of the committees they end up on. Other folks are brought to the fore because they have a similar belief. But I'm not sure if that still exists, if anybody has changed that. I don't think it's been changed. Will it be changed? Might be one of our first topics and issues. Will we go back to the traditional system or not?
One of the big questions in the campaign was many were promising 0% property tax hikes over 3 years. Can this group stick to that?
No. Nobody can stick to that and actually effectively run the city. If you want the city to grow, if you want it to be progressive and attract people from outside, which everybody has said as well, you can't stagnate the internal growth of it. So you can't live with the services that you have. You have to provide more, and that means more taxes. I don't think everybody comes forward with the promise of less taxes. Even the province said, if we're going to increase taxes, we're going to have a referendum to do that. But if you know, our education tax went up 14%, Medicine Hat, and various other communities even more so, and there was never a referendum on that because it's collected by the municipalities and it's buried in there, and the province just sort of put it to the side of, oh, this is not really an increase, but it was an increase. And so there's ways to get around that. When it comes down to those number crunching, there's so many demands, so many considerations, and on a general basis, even through through the aspect of inflation, 2%, you still have to increase something or fire a whole whack of people, because that's where your big, at least 80% of the municipal expenses are salaries and benefits. And the other 20% is so minor that it's like you have to nickel and dime everybody to do that, and it almost becomes an exercise in frustration more than anything else.
Be interested in your take on how some of the candidates ran their campaigns. Anything that you went, oh, that's interesting, or oh, that was a mistake?
Well, some candidates got right out there and put the signs up and were very high profile. Other candidates, not so much. They decided that it would be, if you want me, I'm here, type of an approach. And I mean, in some cases it was effective, in some cases it wasn't effective. There were some candidates that I thought, gee, I would have liked to seen them get a chance. There's some young business people, a few things of that nature that presented themselves very well. Mm-hmm. The debates, really hard to differentiate yourself in a debate when you've got half of the council runners on the table. It becomes almost impossible to do that, especially with a 2-minute time frame and things of this nature, right? And how many of the community actually have the time to sit and watch all of those debates and all of the presentations. So I was kind of impressed with some of the websites that they had created. I thought that some of them were very good. Some were pretty rudimentary, but some were quite good, and it kept your attention a little bit when they're well done. So yeah, I think that's obviously the age of the future. Social media, having good contacts on social media, of course, I think benefited some folks. There was no issue in this election that you were either on this side or you were on that side, and it was so polarizing that it made the difference for everything. I mean, we have the municipally controlled council discussions and all these sort of things, but nothing that was so strong that if you said this, half the population would object to it, and vice versa. So I think there was a lot of good initiatives, and nothing that I would say that put that person over the top. Name recognition is important. Credibility. In the past, the 3 councillors who had previous experience and are back on, I think there was a recognition that they had done good jobs in the past and needed that little bit of experience, and were kind of a nice balance in there when you think of experience versus new people.
One of the things I always like to look at is the number 8 position and the number 9 position. You got in, you didn't make it. The number 8 position was captured by Brian Varga. I think he had, I'm trying to think of my math here. In 2018, he won with 6,115 votes, finishing 8th.
Oh, okay.
This year, 3,870, so almost half the number of votes.
Oh, interesting.
But yeah, he had more votes when he lost in 2021 than he did this year. So I don't know how when you go into a campaign, you're thinking, well, I don't care if I'm number 1. I just want to be number 8. And that was what we heard a lot of the candidates say. But in any given year, how many do you need to be number 8? And how do you figure that out?
It varies every year because it depends on the first 7, how many the first 7 get, and how many are hived off by the last, total of 39. Mm-hmm. So the other group, right? And that changed the math completely because in 2018 when he ran, there was probably 24 or 21. I'm not sure if you have that math or that number, but there was a lot less than the 39 that we had running this time. And I still think that 39 is a good thing because it does show enthusiasm and interest in democracy and in municipal politics and things. But yeah, it's a bit of an apples and oranges argument when you think of it, because all those 39 got certain votes. There was nobody that got 0. And if you had 21 candidates, it could change the math completely based on the top 8, even though it's still the top 8. I'd just say he got half the votes he got in 2018, but he still, and this time he won. I'm not sure what he did in 21, other than the fact that he didn't get in, but I'm not sure what his numbers reflected then.
In 2021, he had 5,283 votes. So
interesting, eh?
Yeah. It's just one of those, like,
It's number of candidates, mathematical probabilities, and it gets pretty convoluted, doesn't
I think
it?
you just have to check your Ouija board. To
Yes, yeah.
figure
Hope for the best. Right?
The other one that I wanted to get your thoughts on was Robert Dumanowski, a longtime counselor, 114 votes short.
Yeah.
Why?
Well, I mean, he was on for 21 years, and I would have to say that most people see he was very credible experience, etc. But none of the candidates that were from the previous council got in. None of the incumbents made it. And I would have to say, when people go to vote, I think name recognition is huge. And there's times when you go and you say, gee, I recognize that name, but I don't remember why or when or how.
Good or for bad, yeah.
But I think in this particular election, when people voted and they recognized a previous councillor from the debacle that we had, I think that made a huge difference. Lots of people looked at that August 21st, I think it was, meeting, and they went online to look at it, and they thought, the mayor didn't seem to be that out of line with her questioning. Why was this council, why did they act so draconian? Why did they take those really strong positions and sanction the mayor, tell her she couldn't get out of her office, had to emails that said cut her pay in half? All those things seemed really extreme. And then when the court decided a year later that they had overreacted, it tarred the entire council, I guess, in that way. And I think unless you're reading and looking at all the council meetings and going through an analysis of everything, the general electorate doesn't have that time to do that. And I think that name recognition is, okay, I remember him, I remember what happened with the mayor, I disagree, I am for the mayor or whatever, and I marked it that way. That's the only thing I can speculate, because he ran a good campaign. As far as I know, he seemed to be together with it. He's intelligent, well thought of person. He's been on for 21 years. That's the only thing I can think of, is that he was an incumbent, and people said, incumbent, no, we're not going to have an incumbent. And yet, the mayor was victorious.
She survived.
She did, and she was the only survivor of the group. Even Andy McGrogan, who ran for mayor, was like fourth, I think he was,
4
right?
out of
So
5, yeah.
it was like, they had sort of taken that position.
Well, we have another 4 years to think about this and plan for the next one, but the next one may not be a civic election. I wanted to get your thoughts on the storm clouds that are brewing in Ottawa before we leave. There's a budget that is coming early in November, and if it fails, we're going to the polls again.
So the November 4th budget will be a confidence vote for the government. So if under responsible government, if of course they don't win that vote, the Prime Minister is required by tradition. There's nothing in the law that says he has to do this, but by tradition he must go to the Governor General and say, sorry, we need to call another election. Now, I don't really think anybody wants another election. The Conservatives are a political juggernaut when it comes to funding. They have the money to do another election. None of the other parties do. They're all in debt. They all have they're still paying off the last election. The NDP is in the middle of a leadership race, so they don't want it. The Bloc Québécois would do it as a symbolic gesture that they aren't happy because Quebec wasn't getting something favorable to them. But all they need, I think there's 169 Liberals, they need 2 or 3 more seats, 2 more votes to win it over. And I would have to say that the NDP would be the logical group to go to. And it's not that everybody's going to agree with the budget. The budget's going to be an austerity budget. It's going to be very difficult. The Prime Minister has said, it's going to be difficult, folks. You're going to have to, tighten your belts, and you're going to have to suck it up because there's no more money. We're going to increase national defense, and we have all these other aspects. We have to The people in the steel and aluminum industry need to get some benefits because they've been, the tariffs are just killing them, etc. Automotive industry is going to need some benefits. It's going to be on the farmers in the West,
Canola,
the soybean farmers are going to need something to help them make it through to the next season, unless we get rid of the tariffs that we're putting on Chinese import electric vehicles. And that's probably not going to happen because that will make Donald Trump mad again, and then we'll be in that situation. So I don't think it's going to be a squeaker, I would suggest. The Conservatives, by their very position as the official opposition, cannot simply say, let's vote for this liberal bill and give them a chance, give them a break. That's not how the parliamentary system works. It's an adversarial system. It's designed to be partisan. It's the way it is, which is why we shouldn't have slates in cities, because it makes it partisan. It makes it completely lack of collaboration in many cases. So I would say that he's going to squeak it through, and then we'll have to see exactly what's in it for that matter. The interesting thing, of course, is in Parliament they've already said what they're going to do, and they've never even seen the bill. And this is what's the problem with the parliamentary system to a large extent, is it is adversarial, it's designed to be partisan, and you're not going to, as a conservative, if you voted as a conservative for this bill as a outrider, you would not be the representative of the Conservative Party in your riding the next time around. That's how it's done, and Americans are just picking this up. Where we've had it for forever, the Americans have probably decided that we can do this actually in the nomination process and nail people, and thanks to Donald Trump, he has pressured his own party that way, and they end up with the MAGA group.
Always something to talk about with Jim Groom, retired political scientist from Medicine Hat College. We could go on more, but I think for now we'll just say thank you and see you next time.
Thanks very much, Brian. Nice to talk.